إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. Last time and the time before, I think we started talking about the asar or the su'r, which is the leftover water if something drinks from it. So the point of that chapter, even though they discuss it under al-asar or the leftover water, the point of it is that they're talking about the saliva of different animals and either people or animals, and what's the ruling on it? Is it Tâhir or is it Najas? So the author, Sayyid Sabiq, he divided it into 5 categories. The first one was human beings, and he said that even if the person is a Muslim or a kafir, if they're on wudu or if they're upon janaba, it doesn't matter, that he considered them all tahir. And so the first thing we talked about is that in general there's ijma' upon, or there's a consensus that the Muslim, their saliva is always tahir. The only difference of opinion was with regards to the ha'il, or the woman who's upon her menstruation. And we said even in that there was only one person who disagreed on that, and it was Abidah as-Salmani from the Tabi'een. And he used the verse when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْمَحِيضِ قُلْ هُوَ أَذَى فَاعْتَزِلُوا النِّسَاءَ فِي الْمَحِيضِ. Or they ask you about the menstruation, say it is something unclean, so stay away from the women during their menstruation. So Abidah as-Salmani rahimahullah, he used this to state that a woman who's in her menstruation should be avoided unrestrictedly, whether it's for intercourse or whether it's staying, or even her saliva. So if she drinks from something, you should stay away from that as well. But the ulama before him, from the Sahaba, no one agreed with that, and after him, no one agreed with it as well. So we consider this to be a weak opinion, and we don't need to follow it, because the evidence that we talked about, I think 2 weeks ago, that the Prophet ﷺ would drink from the same spot when Aisha would drink. So this would reject anything else, and it gives the understanding of the Prophet ﷺ to the issue and what he ruled on it. So we would put that forth. Then we talked about with regards to the kuffar and their and whether they're tahir or najas, and we said there's 3 opinions that the ulama take on that. The first is the jamhur from the Ahnâf and the Shâfi'iyyah and the Hanâbilah, and some of the Mâlikiyyah, that they're considered tahir while they're alive and after they pass away. And we said the second opinion was the opinion of Imam Ibn Hazm rahimahullah from the Thâhiriyyah, and that is that they're najas while they're alive and after they're dead. So he would consider their saliva to also be najas. And the third opinion was the majority of the Mâlikiyyah, and they stated that when they're alive they're tahir, and when they're dead they're considered najas. So their dead bodies are najas, and we would treat it as najasa. So that was the and you guys like that opinion, it seemed like. So that was the 3 opinions. We said that the rajih, at least to me, and I think the majority of the ikhwa that were present, was that while they're alive and while after they're dead, they're considered tahir. But again, we'll get into more detail on that, like when we talk about funerals and the ahkam of funerals, because it's more relevant there with regards to the dead. Then the next thing that the author divided this category into was he mentioned donkeys, mules, and animals and birds of prey. So that was the second category that he mentioned, but we divided it up into donkeys and mules into one category, and birds and animals of prey into a second category, because the reason or the cause for the difference of opinion amongst the ulama was for different ahadith. So it's more precise to divide it up into those 2 categories. And we said that the rajih, based upon the evidence, was that donkeys and mules, their saliva would be considered tahir, because the Sahaba used to ride them, and the Prophet ﷺ rode them as well, and they didn't consider, they never tried, there's no narrations where they tried to even stay away from these things. And even the evidence that is used to say that these things are najas, which is the hadith in I think it was Khaybar, when they were cooking the donkey meat, and the Prophet ﷺ sent one of the Sahaba to call out to the people, Inna Allah wa Rasulahu yanhayanikum an luhum al-humur al-ahliyah fa innaha rijas. So that the Prophet ﷺ sent someone to call out that verily Allah and His Messenger forbid you from the meat of donkeys, because it is rijis. So some use this to say that they're najas, but we would say that they're considered tahir first of all because this is talking about their meat. It's not talking about them when they're alive. So we would consider their meat to be haram, but not to their bodies while they're alive. And secondly, even the rijis doesn't always mean najas, it can mean haram. So we would say that it's, and then we talked about, the last thing we talked about was birds and beasts or animals of prey. So that would be like, with birds it would be like falcons or eagles or owls or anything that hunts. And with animals, or it would be like wolves, coyotes, foxes, bears, as far as I know, and things like that. So the definition of it would be an animal that has fangs or canine teeth that stick out and that they use for hunting and that they hunt for their food with. And we said that there's two opinions about that. The Ahnâf and the Hanâbilah take the opinion that it's considered najas, and the Shâfi'iyyah and the Mâlikiyyah consider them to be Tâhir. And myself, I came away with the understanding, or I find it stronger to be that they're considered Tâhir, or that their saliva is Tâhir. I don't remember what everyone else came away with. Who was here last week? Muhammad, you weren't here, right? No, Ali and Khalid was here. Yeah, so I don't know what you guys came away with.
And I came with, they're pure, but you just can't eat their meat.
Right. Okay. That's what you came away with too. Okay, so that's
also you say fangs and claws.
Claws for the birds, right?
Claws for the birds,
their
fangs
talons.
for the animal.
Yeah. So if they hunt with them. So, and even though we wouldn't come into contact with this daily, what it would happen, I mean, if you had something in your backyard and you saw, some sort of animal or bird drinking from it, or if you were hunting or camping and these types of things, this is more nowadays when we would come into contact with it. But nevertheless, it's still important to go over just so we know the ruling and to discuss the evidences and why we take one opinion over the other. So those were the first two categories that the author mentioned, and we divided the other one into another one. So today, inshallah, we'll continue. The next category that the author mentions is he talks about cats, or water, or containers after a cat has drank from it. So the author, he says, water left in a pot after a cat has drunk from it. So he says such water is also considered pure. And then he mentions the hadith, أن أبا قتادة دخل وضوءا فسكبت له وضوءا فجاءت هرة فشربت منه فأصغى لها الإناء حتى شربت قالت كبشة. And so Kabsha is his niece in this hadith. So she's the one narrating the hadith. So he says, Kabsha said, فرآني أنظر إليه فقال أتعجبين يا ابنة أخي فقلت نعم فقال إن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إنها ليست بنجس إنها من الطوافين عليكم. Or the hadith from Kabsha, and this is what the author is mentioning, Kabsha bint Ka'b, who said, I was under the authority or the care of Abu Qatada, so her uncle, and he entered into the room and I poured water for wudu for him. So a cat came in and drank from the water, or wanted to drink from the water. So Abu Qatada tilted the container so the cat could drink from it. And then Kabsha continues, she says, he noticed that I was watching him, and he asked, are you surprised, O niece, or do you find this strange? So she said, yes. So he said, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, it is not impure, or it's not najas, it is something that intermingles with you, or it lives amongst you. So this is the hadith that the author mentioned as being evidence that cats, their saliva is pure, and anything that they drink from, so the water wouldn't be affected. And likewise food. There's some other narrations when Aisha, there's some weakness in them, but Aisha put some food down and a cat was eating from it, and Aisha continued to eat from it afterwards. So this shows that it's not considered najas. And this hadith that the author mentioned, he didn't mention who narrated it. It's narrated by Abu Dawud and at-Tirmidhi and others. And at-Tirmidhi called it Hasan Sahih. And Ibn Abd al-Barr considered it to be authentic, and An-Nawawi and Ibn Daqiq al-Eid and others, they all considered it to be sahih. So we would say that this hadith is sahih and there's no problem in using it. So this is the evidence that the author mentioned, and it's very clear evidence that the Prophet ﷺ clearly stated that it's not najas. So then just a little bit of commentary on the topic of cats and their saliva and when they drink from something. The first thing is that there's three opinions on the topic with regards to the water if a cat drinks from it. The first is the opinion of the Ahnâf, or the Hanafi madhab. They state that the water is considered Tâhir, but it's disliked to use. And the reason for this is they say it's considered Tâhir, obviously, because the hadith is very clear about it. There's no real way to dispute it when the Prophet ﷺ says that it's not Najas. I mean, there's no real room for anyone to come after that and say anything otherwise. But they say because cats in general, their body, if they were dead, and their, as well as their urine and their feces, and the asl or the default ruling of what a cat would be is that it's considered najas. But the Prophet ﷺ gave an exception to it, so we still dislike to use anything from it because of the way it originally was, but we can't say that it's haram to use or that their saliva is najas. So this is what they say. So they state that if you were to make wudu from that water, your wudu would be valid. It's permissible for you to drink from it, but it's disliked to do. So that's the first opinion. The second opinion is that it's tahir without any karâhah. It's not makruh. So using it after a cat drank from it is just like using it if a cat didn't drink from it. It doesn't affect anything. There's no reward in staying away from it. It's not disliked to use the water in any way. And that's the opinion of the Mâlikis and the Shâfi'îs and the Hanâbilah. And the evidence that they use is always the hadith that the author mentioned. So it's very clear that the Prophet ﷺ said this. So it's like we said, it should be the end of the discussion because there's no real way of going against this hadith. So that's the evidence for that opinion. And there's a third opinion, and it's narrated from Abû Hurayrah radiallahu anhu from the Sahaba, and Muhammad ibn Sîrîn, and many of the other from the Tabi'in, Atâ, and Qatâdah and Al-Hasan al-Basri and others, that they considered it to be najas, and that the water should be thrown out, and that the container should be washed once or twice. And the evidence for this is there's a hadith where it's from Abû Hurayrah that the Prophet ﷺ said, يغسل الإناء إذا ولغ فيه الكلب 7 مرات أولاهن أو أخراهن بالتراب وإذا ولغت فيه الهرة غسل مرة. So there's a hadith from the Prophet ﷺ where he said if a dog drinks from any container, then it should be washed 7 times, the first or the last with mixed with soil or mixed with dirt. And if a cat drinks from it, it should be washed 1 time. So this is a hadith that they use. The first part of the hadith, obviously most of you would know it about the dog, that if it drinks from something, you throw the water out and you wash the container 7 times, one of them, or the first one to be with dirt or mixed with dirt. But the second part of the hadith is actually weak. So because the majority of the narrators, and Imam al-Bukhari and Imam Muslim and others narrated the hadith and they didn't mention anything about a cat. All the thing is about the cat is from Abû Hurayrah's statement. So this is something Abû Hurayrah himself said. And we talked about this, I think last time or the time before, about how sometimes statements from narrators of the hadith sometimes get mixed in with a hadith. So the Prophet ﷺ will say something, the companion will narrate it and might add his own thing, not adding it to the statement of the Prophet ﷺ, but he'll explain something to the person who he's narrating it to, and then later on down the chain it will get mixed up and the people will think that was from the original hadith. So this is one example of that, where the statement of about the cats is actually from Abû Hurayrah. But here what would we say if we have the statement from Abû Hurayrah saying about the cats that they should wash the container 1 time if they drink from it, but we have the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said it's not najas, it intermingles with you, and we have Abu Qatâdah radiallahu anhu making wudu from water after he left the cat drink from it. So what would you guys take, or what would you guys take first from the two?
And Abu Qatâdah,
yeah,
kind of like
shows how he understood it.
Abu Hurayrah's addition necessarily doesn't mean that it's najas.
Or even if it did, we would say that's his own understanding.
All he did was say was I wash it 1 time.
Yeah. Yeah, we can't give. If the Prophet ﷺ says you have to wash something, generally we would say this proves that it's najas, except with some exceptions. But if a Sahabi says that, we can't give it the same level that we would for a hadith, because it's the statement of a Prophet ﷺ. But that could be his own understanding, that it's something.
So when he explained the hadith, he just said
He said, well, this is something because dogs are, if he considered them to be najas, that you should wash it 7 times, and a cat, you should wash it 1 time, because there's no hadith to say you should do it more. So maybe that's his own understanding that he would, that it's, we know about if an animal drinks from something that you want to wash it, you should wash it 1 time.
Okay, so if someone makes wudu from water, is it considered to be tahir enough to drink from?
If they make wudu from it? Yeah.
Okay, so then I think it's like along with the statement of the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba making wudu from that water, I think it would be safe to say that you can use that water without having to wash the container.
So it'd just be like, it doesn't affect it at all. Right, yeah.
Just a question.
Yeah.
Abû Hurayrah, wasn't that his laqab?
Yeah.
Because he had a cat himself, right?
He liked cats, yeah. Yeah.
So I just wanted to prove for him that he had a cat.
Oh. Yeah.
Is that the same hadith that's mentioned next in the section about dogs and pigs?
Yeah, same one. But it doesn't have the other part. It just talks about dogs, right? It doesn't talk about the cats.
Is the hadith about the cats, they're pure and they intermingle with you, that's sahih?
Yeah. Next, another evidence that they use to say that if the ones who say that the cat would be considered najas and you have to wash it, is another hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said, "Tuhûr al-ina idha walagha fihi al-hur an yughsal marratan aw marratayn." Or if a cat, or the way you purify your containers, if a cat drinks from it, is that you wash it once or twice. But this hadith is weak. It's narrated by Imam at-Tahawi, but there's weakness in the chain, and it's actually considered from the statement of Abû Hurayrah as well. So that's another statement. So we have 2 from Abû Hurayrah stating this, but we have nothing from the Prophet ﷺ himself. And the first hadith I didn't mention, it was narrated by at-Tirmidhi, the one about that talks about the dogs and the cats. It's narrated by at-Tirmidhi. And the last evidence that they use is another hadith from Abû Hurayrah, that the Prophet ﷺ said, a cat, أو الهر سبع, or the cat is a predator, or it's a سبع. So they say that if we consider, which is what we talked about last week, hunting animals, if we consider their saliva to be najas, then this hadith would show that a cat is considered a predator, so it would be considered najas. But first of all, we talked about last week that the stronger opinion is that their saliva is considered Tâhir, plus this hadith is weak as well. So there's 2 reasons why we wouldn't accept it. So I think it seems very clear that the ahadith from the Prophet ﷺ and the understanding of Abu Qatâdah is that cat saliva is considered Tâhir. So the next one the author mentions, he says, water left in a pot after a pig or a dog has drunk from it. And again, the point of this is talking about their saliva. So the only reason why we're talking about if they drink from something is because of the saliva of the animal. So anything we decide with regards to the water that they drink from, the same thing should be said about if their saliva touches something else. So if it touched your clothing, if it touched the carpet, or whatever it is, unless there's an evidence to prove otherwise. So just keep that in mind as we're discussing it. So the author said, sorry
to interrupt.
That's okay.
Maybe just because I wasn't here last time, but don't we say that even if something's najas and it goes inside the water is not like you can still use the water as long as the water's not changed by it?
Right.
So if
no, that's true. Yeah. So so the point here is if it went into water, it would have to change it, right? Because the water is something that purifies, right?
So
but if it touched your clothing, your clothing doesn't purify something, right?
Yeah.
So that's why if it touched your clothing, you'd have to wash it, that type of thing. But the water, you'd only have to throw it out or wash the container if it changed the water.
So even if the saliva though of an animal is najas, if like for example he licks the water, and it didn't change the water, is it still okay? It's
still okay, yeah, as long as it doesn't change the water. The only exception to that is the dog that we'll talk about, because the hadith says if the dog drinks from it, then you wash it. Like it doesn't talk about whether it changes or anything. So, but we'll get to that inshallah with this chapter. So he says such water is considered impure and must be avoided. So he's talking about the dog and the pig. And he mentions the hadith, إذا شرب الكلب في إناء أحدكم فليغسله 7 مرات. Or and he says Al-Bukhari and Muslim have recorded that from the authority of Abû Hurayrah that the Prophet ﷺ said, if a dog drinks from one of your containers, wash it 7 times. So this is what the author mentions, and this is Imam Muslim's phrasing. Al-Bukhari just says 7, it doesn't say 7 times. It doesn't really affect it though, but it's just a little bit different in the phrasing. And then the author mentions as well, he says, طهور إناء أحدكم إذا ولغ فيه الكلب أن يغسله 7 مرات أولاهن بالتراب. Or from Ahmad and Muslim, that they have the purification of one of your containers, if a dog licks from it, is to wash it 7 times. The first with dirt or with soil. And then the author says, as for the leftover water of a pig, it is clearly considered filth and impure. So that's as far as I know, that's the end of what the author says about the topic. So again here, we'll divide this up into 2 categories. We'll talk about dogs and we'll talk about pigs. And the reason for this is the evidence for each, there's no reason to combine them into one category. Because even though, if we were to consider both of them najas, and we'll talk about that after, the evidence for each is different. So this hadith about the dogs has nothing to do with pigs, and the evidence about pigs has nothing to do with dogs. So it's not very precise to consider them or to put them in the same category. So inshallah we'll discuss them separately. So first, the issue of pigs. There's 2 opinions about pigs, about whether they're Tâhir or Najas. The first one is that they're considered Najas, and that's the opinion of the majority of the ulama. So the Sâfi'iyyah, the Ahnâf, and the Shâfi'iyyah and the Hanâbilah. And some Malikis consider it to be Najas.
The animal itself.
The animal itself, yeah. And then so the saliva is like a second part, because the animal's Najas, the saliva is Najas, yeah. And the evidence that they use for that is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, قُلْ لَا أَجِدُ فِي مَا أُوحِيَ إِلَيَّ مُحَرَّمًا عَلَى طَاعِمٍ يَطْعَمُهُ إِلَّا أَنْ يَكُونَ مَيْتَةً أَوْ دَمًا مَسْفُوحًا أَوْ لَحْمَ خِنْزِيرٍ فَإِنَّهُ رِجْسٌ أَوْ فِسْقًا أُهِلَّ لِغَيْرِ اللَّهِ بِهِ فمن اضطر غير باغ أو ولا عاد فلا إثم فإن ربك غفور رحيم. Or that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, say, I find not in that which has been revealed to me anything forbidden for you to eat, if someone wishes, except that it is mayta, or if it's a dead animal, or blood poured forth. So the blood that comes out when you slaughter an animal, the first blood that gushes out, that's what the verse is talking about. أو لحم خنزير, or the flesh or the meat of a pig, for that is surely impure or impious. So meaning rijasun أو fisqa. So that's what the verse. So they say here that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about these things, and then He called the meat of pigs to be, or He called it to be rijis, which one of the meanings of rijis is that it's najas. So they use this verse to prove that pigs as an animal itself, whether they're alive or dead, or whether we're talking about their saliva or their skin or anything that comes from them, this whole animal as a whole is considered najas.
So what ayah is that?
It's Surah Al-An'am, 145.
Can you please just every time you say ayah, just say the surah and the verse?
Yeah, inshallah, yeah.
Have to write it.
Yeah, sure.
Does,
Yeah.
does anybody else consider just the lahm as najas, or like we can use the skin? Let's say some people ask, my jacket is made of pig skin, or my belt, or can I wear it? Or
Some take that, yeah. They say it's najas, but you can make it Tâhir when you tan it. So when they take the skin and they put the acid on it, or like different acidic stuff until it dries out and everything. So, but inshallah we'll get to that when we talk about the skin, like the different skins of animals. So this is the verse that that they use. So they state that the najas or the rijis here means najas. And what they say is, even though Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only mentioned the meat, so He didn't mention the bones, He didn't mention the skin, He didn't mention the hair, it means the whole animal. And how does it mean the whole animal? Because with a pig, what is the thing people want from the pig generally? The meat. So He mentioned the most sought after part of the animal, because if the main thing that people use the animal for is najas, then everything else would be, the stuff that's less beneficial would be more deserving of being najas. So that's why they say, so the reason people would go after pig for the most part is that, except for the skin, sometimes, and maybe the hair, I guess there's narrations where people in the past would use it for sewing and stuff like that. But in general, the pig, the point of it is the meat. So they say that's why only the meat was mentioned. And they give the example when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِذَا نُودِيَ لَلصَّلَاةِ مِنْ يَوْمِ الْجُمْعَةِ فَاسْعَوْا إِلَى ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ وَذَرُوا الْبَيْعَ. Or if, O you who believe, and this is from Surah Jum'ah, verse 9, O you who believe, if the call is given to Jum'ah or to the Salat on the day of Jum'ah, then rush to the remembrance of Allah and avoid or throw away or disregard any of your sales. So they say here, it doesn't mean that everything besides sales can be done, and that if you're watching TV you can do it, or if you're sitting around talking it's fine. But the point is sales, which is something very beneficial. This is where their livelihood comes from. Even this thing you have to leave. So everything that's less important should be avoided. So they say this is similar to this verse here, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the meat, but everything else is included secondarily or by default, because the same way that's mentioned about Salat al-Jum'ah. So they give that as an example, because some people will say, oh no, all that's najas is the dead meat, but the animal, which will come next, that the animal when it's alive is considered Tâhir, and the reason why is because only the meat was mentioned in this verse. But this is their reply to that opinion. And they use the hadith for those who were here, I think last week, from Abu Tha'laba, that when he said to the Prophet ﷺ, I live in a place that's the land of hunting, and it's a land that contains Ahl Kitâb, or the people of the book, so the Jews and the Christians. So can we eat from their plates or from their cutlery or use their utensils? So the Prophet ﷺ said, don't use it unless you don't find anything else, then wash it and then use it. Some of this hadith, some of them state that when the Sahabi asked the question, he said they drink wine and they eat pork. So they say here it shows that the Prophet ﷺ ordered them to not use it unless they wash it first. So they say that this shows that pork is considered najas because he ordered them to wash the plates. And this hadith, it's narrated by Abu Dawud at-Tayalisi, but this part is weak. So the talking about the pork and the wine is weak. The hadith itself about washing it and if you're to not use it unless you don't find anything else, and if you don't find anything else, wash it and then use it. This is a sahih hadith, but there's no mention of any pork or wine. But this is a hadith that they use to show that it's considered najas. And the last thing that they use is the hadith that the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man la'iba bin nardashir, فكأنما سبغ يده في لحم خنزير ودمه." Or whoever plays chess, it is as if he has dyed his hand with the meat and the blood of a pig. So they say here that if it's not najas, what's the point of the Prophet ﷺ mentioning this? Because if it's not, if you put your hand in something Tâhir and take it out, then what's the problem? So the fact that the Prophet ﷺ says this, that as a way of keeping you away from it, is an indication that pig is considered najas. But inshallah I'll look in to double check about what the thing was, because Brother Yusuf said it was dice and other brothers said it's backgammon. So I'll double check that, because if it's something halal, we don't want to make it haram, obviously. But the point of it for this thing is that the fact, whether it's chess or dice or backgammon or anything else, the fact that the Prophet ﷺ said that doing this thing is like putting your hand in the dam and the laham. If it was Tâhir, then there would be no wa'id, or there would be no threat, because it would be like saying playing this is like putting your hand in water. It would be like, well, that doesn't. There's no like threat for you to stop it. So they use this as being as evidence for that. So this is the first opinion. The second opinion is that they're considered, while they're alive, they're considered Tâhir. And this is the opinion of the majority of the Mâlikiyyah, or the most of the Malikis took this opinion. And what they say, their evidence for this is, they say, first of all, nothing is considered najas until we have clear evidence for it. So every animal in the world would be considered Tâhir when it's alive, unless we have an ayah or a hadith to show that it's najas. So they say, then they look at the evidence that the other people mentioned. So they say that the verse when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called it rijis, this is, first of all, rijis doesn't always mean haram. It can mean it doesn't always mean najas. It can mean haram as well. So they say here, it's what's meant is haram, not najas. And they also say that also what's only talked about is the meat. So it's not the whole animal. So we know if something's not allowed for you to eat, then you can't give it the shar'i dhabh. So once it's dead, it would be considered a dead animal, and it's najas now. So that's why only the lahm was talked about in the verse. So they say that while it's alive, it's considered Tâhir, but after it's dead, it's considered haram to eat, and it could even be considered najas, and that's what the verse is talking about. So it's not talking about the animal while it's alive. So that's the first thing that they say, and then they say that that the other hadith about it that specifically talk about, or like when we said about washing the plates because there's pork in it, they say, well, this is a weak hadith anyway. So after hearing these two opinions and the evidence for it, obviously we're not talking about eating pork. So I mean, everyone's agreed. I mean that it's anything from the animal shouldn't be eaten. So that's not what we're talking about. When the animal is alive, what do you guys think about the evidence for each?
Just a quick question about the hadith they use when they're talking about nardashir. So how
Yeah.
are they using that hadith to prove something is najis? I just don't get
They
it.
say that when the only reason you shouldn't touch something, unless it's like someone's like a woman or something like that, is because it's najas. I wouldn't say you can't touch the wall, you can't touch the chair. You'd say, well, why? Is it najas? Is it clean? If it's clean, I can touch it. If it's not clean, I can't touch it. So they say here, the fact that the Prophet ﷺ said, doing this is like you're putting your hand and it gets dyed with it. So you're keeping your hand in it the point of it is to keep people away from it. You'd only stay away from it because it's najas. So that's how they're saying. It's not very clear, but it's something that matters, right?
So are we considering the mouth of a pig to be najis?
That's what we're talking about now.
Okay.
Is the saliva from it najis or not? What do you guys think from
that
the?
would only be if it's considered najis if it was alive, when it's alive, right?
When it's dead, for sure it's najis, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So that's what we're talking about now.
Yeah, it's haram.
But doesn't it seem based on the ahadith and like I don't know, like maybe the ayah from the Quran, doesn't it maybe seem from the understanding of the Salaf that it was the animal, like the actual animal itself is a najis animal, even when it is alive. Like you could possibly, like I see the logic behind how the Mâlikiyyah interpret it, right?
Yeah.
But it just kind of seems, first of all, like the safer thing. Second of all, it just seems like it fits more with the context of all the other ahadith.
Yeah. So I mean, do you like? Myself, I consider it would be najas. Like I see that to be stronger.
Yeah.
Like while it's alive as well?
While it's alive, because even if we, like the verse when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, فَإِنَّهُ رِجِسٌ, you can't say that it's haram, or I mean, obviously we know it's haram, but we can't say that the rijis means haram because the ayah started with, only thing that's forbidden upon you is this, this, and this, and this, because it's rijis. So for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to say, this is haram on you because it's haram, He said it in the beginning. He already told us, and so we agree that it's haram. So for Allah, here it would be. It seems like the stronger is that it means najas here because.
Those would be redundant.
Yeah, and we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wouldn't does anything that's redundant. He's telling us the reason why He made it haram. So for Him to say the reason is haram because it's haram, I mean, what is it? We already know it's haram.
But that's clear that Allah says that the animal is najas. So what was the evidence that while it's alive it's still Tâhir?
They say that this ayah is talking about its meat. So they say first of all, and so I mean, so when it's dead, it's najas. But when it's alive, it's a live animal. It's not meat. It's not the meat that's being talked about in the ayah. And they say that the rijis means haram, not najas.
Oh,
that's what they say. So, but then we say, well, no, we don't agree with that because Allah called it haram in the beginning. So why would He repeat it?
But like, isn't like kind of in the Arabic language if you see like
you can
like the whole meat of the pig kind of like it refers to the whole animal itself.
Yeah, and that's what the other ones say.
Everything khabith.
Yeah. So the meat is najis. It means so the animal itself. The point of the animal is meat. It's not to ride. Right. Yeah.
Everything else becomes najis because that's the best part of it.
Generally, yeah, that's the argument.
The less beneficial parts that you said would be. So the whole animal should be najis.
Right.
So
I was going to say, the people that say that the saliva wouldn't be, wouldn't they also make exceptions for anything else that isn't meat, like milk? Would those people say, oh, you can milk a pig, then you drink its milk because it's not meat and it's,
They would say it's najas, or sorry, it's not najas, but it's haram because it's from a pig. So we can't eat anything from a pig, but it's not because it's najas.
But wouldn't they say, what if somebody came to those people and said, yeah, but the ayah only says meat?
Yeah.
This isn't meat, it's milk.
Then be another.
Wouldn't they be wrecking their own argument?
Kind of, yeah.
Being that specific?
Yeah,
if they be that specific and they say, well, it only means meat, then
everything else can be used.
The ayah doesn't say you can't drink its milk either. Then it's not meat. So
right.
Okay.
Yeah, it gets you into like a circle. Like
what's that?
You can milk a pig.
Did I what?
Do pigs have milk?
Yeah.
Any mammal does.
I didn't even know that.
Wow.
So inshallah we'll go on to the dogs if there's any questions about the pigs before we stop.
So I mean the pigs is the saliva and the
saliva of the pig is
everything from the pig is everything, yeah.
So the saliva is
the strong opinion is that it's najas, everything. So the animal, alive, dead, it's it's saliva, it's blood, it's urine, it's everything is najas. That's the right. Okay, so the first about the dogs is so we can talk about it. The ulama, they talk about it in two ways. They talk about the saliva, and they talk about it also about the animal. So there'll be some mixing here when we're talking about the animal and the saliva, because unlike the pig, the ayah is about the animal itself, but the ahadi or the evidence for the dogs are specifically about the saliva. So you might see a little bit of mixing between them. So the first about the dogs. The dog itself is considered an animal that's Tâhir according to the Ahnâf. Or sorry, no, let's start with the saliva is better because that's what the author's talking about. Sorry. So according to the Ahnâf and the Shâfi'iyyah and the Hanâbilah, the saliva is considered najas.
So according to who?
Everybody except Mâlik.
The Hanbali or the Ahnâf and the Shâfi'iyyah and Hanâbilah. And the evidence that they use is the same. It's what the author mentioned. So the hadith about the saliva, if it drinks from a container, wash it 7 times.
So it is najas.
In this opinion, yeah. So they say, first of all, the Prophet ﷺ told you to wash it. So that if he tells you to wash something, this shows that it's najas. On top of that, he told you to wash it 7 times. So it means it's more najas, or it's more impure than other things. And on top of that, he told you to wash one of them with dirt. So these 3 things put together show that it's najas, and it's more najas, I guess you could say, than other things. So this is the first thing that they use. And that's how they use it. Another thing that they use is a hadith that when the Prophet ﷺ said, "Al-kalbu khabith wa thamanuhu akhbathu minh." Or from Abdullah bin Abbas that the Prophet ﷺ said, the dogs are khabith, or they're filthy, and its fee, or so the thing that you pay for it, or the money you take when you sell it, is akhbath min, or it's more filthy than it. And this hadith is narrated by al-Uqayli.
The money that you pay for it?
Yeah, so like any interaction of like monetary or that you're paying for it or taking money for it is considered khabith. So you're not allowed to buy or sell a dog. According to, in general, yeah, it's not allowed. But this hadith, it's a weak hadith. So about the dog being khabith, this is a weak thing.
Yeah, because they use it to take care of the sheep.
Yeah, so like you can use it for those types of things, yeah. And also another hadith, ثَمَنُ الْكَلْبِ خَبِيث وَهُوَ أَخْبَثُ مِنْهُ. Or that the fee for a dog is filthy, and it, meaning the dog, is even more filthy than it. And this hadith is narrated by al-Hakim, but it's also a weak hadith. So so far they have 3 things. They have or 2 things, I guess you could say. The hadith about the dog being filthy, and the hadith about to wash the thing 7 times. So they have these 2 evidences. And they say that the khabith means najas. And what is the evidence for that? They say the hadith when the Prophet ﷺ said, لا صلاة بحضرة الطعام ولا وهو يدافعه الأخبثان, or that there's no salat in the presence of food, nor when he's fighting off the two khubuths, or the two things that are khabith, meaning urine and feces. So if you're fighting, you're trying to stop yourself from urinating because you have to go or to go to the washroom, that there's no salat when you're in this state. So they say here, khabith means najas because the Prophet ﷺ called urine and feces khabith, and we know that they're both najas. So they say that this is what's mentioned by the hadith.
That hadith is authentic?
Which one?
The one you just mentioned?
About the salat? Yeah.
Yeah, so there's no salat.
Yeah, that's in Sahih Muslim.
So you cannot, so this kind of talk about, since you mentioned you cannot pray if you're in a state of having to relieve yourself?
You're not supposed to. Whether it invalidates your salat, I mean, we'll get into that inshallah, but in general you shouldn't. But I guess they say if you know that you can hold it and it's not gonna, make you where you're actually you're not completing your salat correctly because you only go into ruku' this much and then you go then it's for sure not allowed. But then if other times, I mean, yeah.
No, so if you could, then it wouldn't invalidate it.
If you could, the stronger opinion is that it wouldn't invalidate it.
But it's obviously better.
It's better not, because you're not gonna, because just like the food, if there's food sitting there and then all of a sudden you're gonna be, you're only focused on I want to eat right now, right? So that's why.
About the food,
If there's food,
ready.
You should eat first.
You should eat first and then go for salat.
And then go, yeah. But if you go for salat, your salat is still accepted. But it's makruh to do that.
So that's why in Ramadan, that's why we break our fast first.
And then go pray. It's better because also because you're supposed to rush to there's a hadith about eating very right when the
But you'll miss jama'ah that way. Like people who fast on Monday and Thursday.
Yeah.
Like they miss jama'ah. So what do? You catch jama'ah or you can.
Well, you break your fast with something.
Just anything, like it could be tamar. You don't have to eat.
No, you don't have to. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You don't have to fill up to the.
But back to the topic that you just mentioned. Wouldn't we disregard that whole entire argument because the hadith is weak?
For this thing, yeah. But then we still have the other hadith that are authentic, right? About the washing the.
Oh no, I'm talking about how they interpreted that hadith. That's all really relevant because it's weak.
It is, yeah. You're right. But sometimes they would consider it. So, but us, if we're gonna say, we'd say, well, first of all, like we talked about, I don't know if you were here, but the first thing we do about any topic is bring all the evidence and then take away anything that's weak.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. We shouldn't go, well, what if this, and how does it understand this, and what do we say about that? I mean, it doesn't. If it's weak, it doesn't matter. So that's why the correct way with fiqh is to get rid of everything that's weak and then deal with what we have that's authentic.
Well, some people like that.
Some do the opposite. And then, you get lost, and there's really no point because in the end, then you have to say, well, it's weak, so I don't care. Really, it doesn't affect anything. So this is the things that they say. So that about the washing and about the dog being khabith, and also they mention the hadith about when the Prophet
washed you 7 times.
That's the first one, yeah. But they also mention about when the Prophet would visit some people. And they were really far away, and there was another people who were very close to him, but he would pass by their house and he would never visit them. So they asked, well, why don't you visit us? And he said, there's a dog here, and then they said, well, there's a cat in the other place. And then so the Prophet ﷺ said in what they claim he said that the dog is najas and the cat isn't najas. So, but it's not even a hadith. There's nothing for it. It's just something that the fuqaha or the scholars of fiqh mention. So, I mean, again, we would disregard that because it's not even a hadith.
Sorry, question I don't know if it's even relevant, just I'm looking to my mind. If, for example, do we only use a hadith, or could we use events, for example, from like Sîrah or something? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, if there's an event for Sîrah that can support something, are we allowed to use it, or do we only use a hadith? Because I know that the scholars were much more strict with ahadith than they were with Sîrah.
Right.
So.
Yeah, when it comes to ahadith about rulings, so about issues of aqeedah or issues of where it's going to have an effect on how we perform our deen, the ahadith have to be very, the scholars of hadith are very strict with it. But when it's about something that maybe there's something that's wajib, that's there's strong evidence from the Quran or Sunnah, and then there's another hadith that's not as strong, but it shows why this action is good. Some will say you can still use it for that because it'll give you like a boost or give you encouragement to do this action. Or with the seerah, they lower the standards because it's not necessarily always giving you ahkam. It's something that's about how the Prophet ﷺ lived that will give you example of how to live your life, but it's not making something haram, making something wajib, making something that the rewards are based upon it. So they lower the standards with that.
Could you derive the ahkam from seerah? That's what I was asking.
If it's confirmed authentic.
Yeah.
But we can't take the ahkam from Umar, Khattab, from Abu Bakr, right? Sahih.
If it's sahih from them, then we take it as long as it doesn't contradict the Quran and Sunnah.
Right.
Because the Prophet ﷺ said, "Alaykum bi sunnati wa sunnat al-khulafa ar-rashidin al-mahdiyyin min ba'di," and the Prophet ﷺ said, "Ittabi'u alladhayni min ba'di Abu Bakr wa Umar," and other ahadith about them. So we would take from and in general, even the Sahaba in general, we take from them their understanding and that. So this is the evidence that they use to say that the dog is najas, and the arguments that they use. So they use these ahadith, and this is how they use them. The second opinion, which is the opinion of the Mâlikiyyah, is also the opinion of Dawud ibn Ali al-Zahiri and Ibn Hazm and Imam al-Zuhri and many other of the ulama, Sufyan al-Thawri and Ash-Shawkânî and others, and Awza'i as well, that the dog itself as an animal is considered Tâhir. And the evidence that they use is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, or He mentioned in the Quran about using animals or using dogs for hunting. And there's no evidence that the Prophet ﷺ told anybody to wash the animal or to take the saliva off after the animal had been used for hunting. It's permissible to use for hunting, yeah. But the ones who say it's najas, they say you'd have to wash it because of the saliva, and the ones who say it's not najas, they say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't mention anything, and the Prophet ﷺ didn't teach the people to wash the animal in a certain way. So this shows that it's considered Tâhir. So this is one of their evidences.
They say that the animal is not najis?
That it's not najis.
So therefore its saliva is najis. Is that what they're trying to
They say it's not najis, right?
Okay.
What's that? The dog, yeah. And the verse for that is Surah Al-Ma'idah 4. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, يَسْأَلُونَكَ مَاذَا أُحِلَّ لَهُمْ قُلْ أُحِلَّ لَكُمُ الطَّيِّبَاتِ وَمَا عَلَّمْتُم مِّنَ الْجَوَارِحِ مُكَلِّبِينَ تُعَلِّمُونَهُنَّ مِمَّا عَلَّمَكُمُ اللَّهُ فَكُلُوا مِمَّا أَمْسَكْنَ عَلَيْكُمْ وَاذْكُرُوا اسْمَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ سَرِيعُ الْحِسَابِ.
Who are they? The Malikis?
They say it's Malikis, Ibn Hazm, the Zahiris, and some of the Tabi'een, so Ikrimah, Imam al-Awza'i,
Sufyan
that its saliva is not najis, no.
Sheikh Sufyan al-Thawri, he was one of the Tabi'een?
No. He's from the Atba' Tabi'een or after that. Shawkânî is very recent. He's, I think, maybe 150 years ago.
Sufyan al-Thawri books, it's very, very good.
He's from they say, Amir al-Mu'mineen for hadith.
The hadith of Rasulullah said about hunting.
Yeah. This is the verse from the Quran.
Didn't you say there was a hadith?
Oh, the hadith, yeah. The Prophet ﷺ, when he gave instruction on how to do it. So if you say Bismillah, then you send it, and then if he brings it back, so that type of thing.
That's authentic?
It's authentic, yeah. And the verse in English would be, they ask you what is lawful for them. Say lawful unto you are at-tayyibat, so anything that's halal. And those beasts and birds of prey that you have trained as hounds, training and teaching them, so eat that which, teaching them what Allah has taught you, so eat from that which they catch for you, but mention the name of Allah over it. So if you send a hawk or a falcon to catch something, or if you send a dog, or I guess any other animal that could be trained for that, then you could eat that. So it was known that dogs were the main animal that was done at the time, even more than even nowadays, like they're used more than birds. So the fact that the Prophet ﷺ didn't mention anything about how to wash it off, they say that this is evidence that it's Tâhir.
That's what verse in
Surah Al-Ma'idah 4. And also they mention a hadith from Abdullah bin Umar that he said, كانت الكلاب تبول وتقبل وتدبر في المسجد في زمان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فلم يكونوا يرشون شيئا من ذلك. Or that the Prophet or Abdullah bin Umar said, dogs used to urinate, then come and go, or urinate, come and go in the masjid during the time of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they did not used to pour any water over anything from that. And that's narrated by al-Bukhari and Abu Dawud and Ahmad. So they say that if the urine that the dogs would urinate with, the Sahaba didn't pour any water over that, even though it was in the masjid, then how about the saliva?
Who said the hadith?
It's in Bukhari.
But then
Who mentioned the hadith?
Abdullah bin Umar.
But doesn't that contradict the other hadith that if the dog drinks from one of your containers, wash it 7 times?
Inshallah, we'll get into that, yeah.
Okay.
So,
also, the other hadith where the guy urinated in the masjid and they poured water over it.
That's a human though.
that's a human though, so they're saying, like, there's ijma' that any human urine or feces is considered najas, but then there's ikhtilaf after that about different animals.
Okay.
So is that Bukhari, Muslim, and
Bukhari, Ahmad, and Abu Dawud.
Because it depends on the amount of food they eat, right?
Which? The dogs?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
There's a hadith about the sabi, تجاوز السبع.
Oh, you mean for humans, you mean? Yeah, if they're under 2. Or sorry, if they haven't eaten yet, then the males, you just sprinkle water on it, but the females, you have to wash it. Yeah.
I'm sort of confused. You know the story when you mentioned about when they asked Rasulullah why you don't pass through this house, he said because there's a dog.
Yeah.
Because it's najas, right?
Yeah.
And if you're saying like the urine of the dog is not najas.
Yeah.
And the saliva is not najas.
Well, this hadith, it's not even a hadith though. It's just something people say. Like, so that's why, like, so, sometimes someone will tell you don't do this, and they'll tell you some story. I mean, there's no basis for it though. So that's this story. There's no basis for it. It's just something people would say. So far we see that the opinion that it's najas, they bring evidence. The ones who say that it's not najas, they also bring evidence. So all that's left now is to see, well, what are the ones who say it's not najas, what do they say about the evidence from the ones who say it's najas? So we have the hadith from the Prophet ﷺ that he told us to wash the container. So just looking at this, it's a strong evidence. So the ones who say it's not najas, well, what do they say about it? They say, first of all, they mention the ayah about hunting, and they say, if something is najas, what do we have to do with it? What do we have to do, you guys?
We have to wash it. Is that from the
Wash it
dog?
6 times.
No, something najas in general.
Oh, okay.
Say,
put water on it.
No, say you got najasa on your on your plate. Say somehow your baby got their najasa on a pot that you have.
Wash it.
How many times?
Once.
At least once or twice.
Once or twice.
Till it's gone. That's all we have to do.
Yeah.
Do you have to wash it with dirt or anything?
No.
Just wash it, right? So they say about this, the Prophet ﷺ didn't tell us wash it till it's gone. He said wash it 7 times. So this shows that it's not because it's najas, it's because it's ta'abbudi, or it's an ibadah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that the Prophet ﷺ told us to do a specific number of times. And they say second, when he added the dirt, then this shows that it's not because of najasa, because najasa is washed with water or anything that takes it away. But when he added a specific number and a specific thing to wash it with, this shows that it's ta'abbudi, or it's an act of ibadah, and it's not necessarily related to najasa. So this is what they say. And they say, yes, maybe your argument that, well, a regular najasa we wash 1 time or until it's gone, but this is 7 times, so it shows it's even more najas. They say when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the Prophet ﷺ, when his daughter died, he ordered the women to wash her 3 or 5 or 7 times, or as many times as they thought was necessary. But so does this mean that she's najas? No. Of course not. We know any Muslim in general is not najas, so how about the daughter of the Prophet ﷺ? So they argue that the number doesn't prove anything. All it proves is that it's ta'abbudi. Yeah.
Okay.
And they say, well, what about the dirt? They say the same hadith, when the Prophet ﷺ told them to wash his daughter, he ordered them to put kafur inside of it, which is like camphor. It's like a, what is it? Like a, so it's kind of a plant, something from a plant. But this doesn't mean that it was because she was najas. It was just something extra to do that the Prophet ﷺ told them to do. So they say that this is, this is why the number doesn't matter and why the dirt doesn't matter. So this is the evidence or the arguments that they mention. So far, what do you guys think is stronger then?
Those who says is najas.
Do you think it's a najas? Still think it's... Yeah.
Al-Hanâbilah and Ahnâf with Shâfi'iyyah, right?
Yeah.
And the hadith that they used, wash 7 times, it's more Allah Alam.
So you think that washing it 7 times is because it's najas?
Yes.
Yeah.
And we especially use the soil though, because we know there's another hadith about using the soil for the Tâhârah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Allah Alam.
Okay.
But then why would Allah say in the Quran that you can hunt with the Karâhah, you have to wash
especially the ayah in Al-Am.
But the animal that doesn't mean that they
No,
have
but
to
how do they
wash
hunt? They bite it with its mouth. That's the point of the hunting.
Yeah. So when it bites it, it picks it up.
A rabbit, it's got its saliva all over the rabbit.
And you don't, and it says no, you don't have
Okay,
to
but you're gonna eat the birds. You have to
Even if it wasn't
wash it. That's why Allah Alam.
you could just wash it.
How about when they say that and when you wash the Prophet ﷺ, they washed his daughter, they did it more times than one.
Because it is a human being.
Mm.
It's more ibadah, more to Allah. This animal is a human being, Allah Alam.
Yeah. How about you guys?
I don't know.
No? This doesn't, if we say it's not najas, doesn't mean we don't wash the container though. That's the...
No, washing the container is something else. We have direct commands to wash the
So
container.
even if we consider it Tâhir, we'll still wash it.
Yeah, 100%.
Right.
But it just makes sense. I don't know what the opinion of the Mâlikiyyah makes sense to me, and on
Yeah.
top of that, just the ayah and the fact that Rasulullah was giving instructions on how to hunt with it. If it was najas, he wouldn't tell you go hunt with it.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know, that's just my
So the point of it is so we're agreed that if we had a container out and an animal ate from it, the dog drank from it, we would throw the water and wash it. I mean, everyone's going to do that. The time when it comes with us is if, say, we're out somewhere and a dog comes up and licks you, or a dog touches your clothing and licks the clothing, or something like that. Can you pray like this or not? If you think that it's Tâhir, but you have to wash the container, then you could pray like that. If you think it's najas all the time, then you have to wash it. And just the point on that is if you think that it's najas, then you wash it 7 times for the container, but the rajih would be that you only wash it 1 time if it's on your clothing, because the hadith about it only talks about 7 times with containers. It doesn't talk about. So if you take that opinion, then you only need to wash it 1 time.
So which ayah is that with the dog, with the hunting with the dog?
Yeah.
Haytham, maybe this is going too deep into it, but maybe it's when you use them for hunting and they bite let's say a rabbit and bring it back and the saliva's on it, you can't eat that rabbit raw anyways, and you have to cook it. And fire kills bacteria anyways.
Yep.
But I'm gonna use something else. It has nothing to do with hadith or nothing, but this is very recently they found out that they did a research on this dog who licked something, and they washed it and washed it and washed it and washed it and washed it with every product you could think of, and the bacteria was still there.
Yeah.
And then they took turab and they cleaned it with dirt or soil or whatever, and it got rid of the bacteria.
Yeah.
Doesn't that kind of prove the najasa part in a way?
That it is najas.
That it is najas, and also it says you don't have to wash it if it bites like if you use it for hunting, but in reality you're gonna cook it anyways because you're not allowed to eat raw meat anyways.
But
why can't you raw
meat? Well, not raw meat, but you can't eat meat with flowing blood in it, for instance, right?
No, you just can't eat the blood. You can't take when you slaughter the animal, the blood that comes out.
The initial blood?
That you can't take. Anything else left in the animal though you can.
You could eat it raw though?
Yeah.
It could be.
You guys from Bilad al-Sham, don't you guys, that's all you eat, raw meat?
Raw liver.
It's not good for you.
No, I mean, whether it's good for you is one, I mean, if it was proven to be, that it's bad for you, even if it kills you, something like, I mean, whatever not raw meat, but anything, we'd say it's haram to have, right? But it doesn't mean it's najas. That's 2 different issues. That's the point.
And bacteria and najasa aren't synonymous too.
You might sign, yeah.
The fact that the scientists might have proven that you can remove bacteria from soil, that might be true, but that's really the same thing as something being najas. Because, even cheese is made from bacteria. It's the 2 things might not be synonymous. So if one proves this, that's good, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the adla or the factor that you would consider when determining what is najas itself. Right?
Okay. So what's the correct opinion here?
Myself, I take the opinion that that it's Tâhir, but you still have to wash the container. But if it comes on your clothing or your hand, or if it's on the ground, then it's Tâhir. If you touch a dog, even if it's wet or if it's dry, it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect it.
I don't know, this is something I've been raised, and I'm pretty sure every person has been raised that the dog is like, you don't even touch it.
Yeah.
It's disgusting, like you touch it, you're gonna die.
Yeah.
And so I don't find any evidence to say that like anything that you can't touch a dog.
No, there's nothing for it.
But you can't have a dog.
But owning a dog, like, that's the problem.
Owning a dog, keeping a dog in your house, that's one issue, which, I mean, that's not related to whether it's najas or not. Buying and selling a dog, but also that's not, I mean, there's lots of things that are haram to sell and buy or eat that have nothing to do with najas. But with dogs, yeah, so we'd say the ahkam related to dogs in short would be if they lick from a container, you have to wash it 7 times, the first one with dirt. If you take it to be najas, everything, then you'd have to wash anything it touches. You can't buy and sell them. And then there's difference, I mean, if you're buying one that's taught, then are you paying for the animal itself, or are you paying for the teaching that, you know, the training that was given? That's another issue. Also, keeping it in your house.
Sorry, would the buying and selling and keeping the house be dependent on whether you think it's najis or not?
No.
Or is that separate?
Like me, I consider it Tâhir. I still can't keep it in my house.
Is it wadah that you can't keep it in your house and you can't?
Yeah, because the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said the angels won't enter I think Jibreel told him that the angels won't enter a house that has pictures or a dog. So I mean, we would. Yeah.
Pictures, what do you mean by pictures?
Like, I mean, for sure drawings, for sure statues, you know, photographs. That's a long topic to get into, but.
So teddy bears, right? For sure.
Allahu alam.
100%. It's the same as a statue. Think about it.
I mean, some say it is. Some say, well, no, it's for kids. It's an exception, and they have, you know, hadith from Aisha where she had a stuffed, what do you call it? Pegasus, like a horse with wings, and the Prophet ﷺ didn't say anything about it, and yeah. So I mean, we'll get in. You know, that's a whole other topic for.
It wasn't for her.
So if you take the.
It wasn't for her. It was for children.
You have to obviously wash it 7 times with the first one with dirt because the hadith tells you to do so.
For which?
For the dog. If it touches the container.
Container, you do it that, yeah.
Because the hadith commands you to do that.
Right.
But then the ayah from the Quran, it says it doesn't specify that you have to clean the animal after using it, the dog to hunt or anything like that. So if you take the opinion that the dog is not najas, but so what if a dog comes and licks your clothes? You can pray without washing it.
Right.
Because it's not najas, but if it touches your container, you have to wash it 7 times because you're specifically commanded to do so.
Right.
But otherwise, it's not najas because.
Right.
Okay.
And even if you consider it najas, you know, for everything, then the only thing that talks about 7 times is with containers. So that's something. If you're not convinced that it's Tâhir, which I mean, anyone could, you know, it's up to you then. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to wash it 7 times and 1 with dirt. So you wouldn't have to take your clothing and rub dirt on it and then take water 7 times.
And let's talk about when it licks the container, not when it just touches it, right?
Right, when it licks from it.
So the only time you'd ever wash anything 7 times is when the dog licks the container.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Any other touching with contact with the dog, it's not najas, so you don't have to clean that.
Right.
Okay.
So one container.
I was gonna say I have one question. Like I became like most people. I started with what I always knew is that the dog is najas.
Yeah.
I used to think that touching it dry, wet, saliva, you know, it's feces, anything that had to do with the dog was najas.
Yeah.
Just like any other Arabic guy that most people that they're raised, they know that. That's from.
You stay away from anything from
anything with the dog is just najas, right? And the basic evidence that I was told for that was the hadith about the 7 and the 1, like washing it, and it made sense to me. When I heard Ibn al-Qayyim talk about the opinion of the Mâlikiyyah and how they could hunt with them, and I started to imagine how would a dog kill another animal. Yeah. There's only one weapon the dog has is really its fangs.
Yeah.
And it's going to be biting into it with the same saliva dripping into the same animal.
Right.
And then the fact that there was nothing ever mentioned about how you'd have to clean it or deal with it.
Right.
Not from the Sahaba who used to use them all the time. Adi ibn Haytham used to send his dogs. And killing it. So then I started to change my opinion. So I lean more towards the view that it is Tâhir because of the ayah about hunting with them. Yeah. However, I'm stuck with one thing, and this is the part that I wouldn't know how to answer. If somebody were to come to me from the other side and say, okay, fine, you don't say that the saliva is najas, right? And I would say no, based on this evidence. They would say, then what is it that you're purifying this cup from, or this dish, or this bowl? What are you removing with the 7 washings,
Right.
one with dirt. What if there's only two categories? There's najas and there's not najas.
Right.
Then what is it that you're removing then?
Mhm.
I wouldn't have an answer for that. It'd be tricky.
Right.
But what if,
The saliva itself, even though it's Tâhir.
But why do you have to remove it at all?
it's like if you sneeze on a plate, right?
No,
Is that
so
najis?
when you're on janaba, what are you washing off?
Janab. You're watching off something that's najis.
No,
Just
what's
the
what's
whole-
najas?
On your body.
Oh,
like
okay,
on
no,
your-
I thought, sorry.
Or even wudu.
Wait.
What are you washing off when you make wudu?
هي
تعبد.
is more تعبد والله أعلم.
So that's what they say about this.
I would
Prophet
think
ﷺ
it's
told
right.
you to wash it.
So washing the bowl is ibadah then?
Yeah, and because the Prophet just like, you know,
be
if you break, if you pass gas, there's nothing physically on you, right?
No, that's right.
Or even if you say, I mean, if you take the opinion I take, if you touch, if you touch your own private area, like it breaks your wudu. There's nothing najis on you. Your whole body, you have to go make wudu. There's nothing najis on your arm. There's nothing najis on your face. There's nothing najis on your feet. Same with janaba. You know, if you make janaba and then you clean any najasa off of you, you're still on janaba. So when you're jumping in the water or showering to clean yourself, you're not removing anything physical off of your body. It's a ta'abbudi issue. So
what if they come back and say, that's fine, that's true, but we have a thing called, we have shurut for salat, we know we have these things for when it comes to the issue of what nullifies your tahara when it comes to like a major hadith or a minor
Yeah.
hadith. So we have all those evidences to talk about wudu, for instance,
Right.
or janaba or anything. Or if you pass gas and all that stuff. We have all those evidences.
Mhm.
So what is it that is, like, what's being broken then from the dog licking it? Just like when I use the evidence that if I pass gas or I'm junub or whatever,
right.
then I either have a major hadith that has to be removed or a minor one. What's the major hadith or minor hadith that's being removed from the dog licking it? Like what property now is being changed?
It's unusability because the dog touched it with its tongue. That the Prophet ﷺ judged that this is unusable because the dog licked from it, and it's not
So it's
usable.
not even about eating then. So say I have a spoon that I beat my kids with,
Right.
whatever. Like I don't use it for eating. I'm not going to mix it. I'm just
Yeah,
using
yeah.
it because I can think of it. I don't know what else
Yeah.
you use. Whether a container. I have this special bowl that I throw at my neighbor. Anyway, it's not about eating necessarily. So if the dog licked it, for me to make it usable, to beat my kids.
Or the
with milk-
usability for eating, I guess it would be, because the point of it is it was drinking something. I mean, so this container is being used for containing water,
Yeah.
and the dog came and drank the water that you would have been drinking.
Right.
So for you to use it again at that
Contain
point
water.
to contain water, you would have to clean it.
I see.
Similar, yeah. So that would be the argument.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
That's a good answer.
Allahu alam.